Hello, I'm taping this on Thursday, which means there is a Hangout tonight. I hope to see you there. On the show today, I've got David Rothkopf. That starts at 21 minutes into today's show. But first, it was day 3 of the Republican Nazi National Convention. The current president of the United States has COVID, and the pressure for him to drop out is continuing at the highest levels. More details come out about the young man who tried to assassinate Donald Trump. All that and so much more on today's Stand Up. Well, hello, and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up. I'm so glad you are here. I can't do it without you, and I wouldn't do it, frankly, without you, because why would I be talking into this microphone, putting so much work into it without you? Thank you for giving me such a purpose. Thank you for sending me all those vitamin N pictures. Please keep them coming. Get out in nature and send me your vitamin N, hashtag vitamin N photos. I get to go through them and include them in every day's email to paid subscribers. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic. All right. I hope to see you tonight. I've got news for you. Let's get to it. It was day 3 of the Republican National Convention. The big moment, of course, was the introduction of J.D. Vance, who delivered the keynote address. A couple takeaways from the RNC. Here's the Washington Post. It said Vance's speech sent a signal to the GOP of old. They focused on the chaotic Afghanistan withdrawal, which was so necessary and was always going to be messy. But they played a video of family members of 6 of the 13 U.S. soldiers killed at that horrible time. And some of them spoke afterwards. This kind of thing is so upsetting to me because those 13 soldiers were killed all at one point from one bomb, suicide bomber, I believe, but thousands died in Afghanistan and Iraq as a result of Republicans. It seems really cheap and horrible that those families were there, but I didn't lose a loved one, so I'm not going to judge them. Lots of Gold Star families have, of course, criticized Trump for his reported comments dismissive of the sacrifice of slain soldiers who he thinks are suckers and losers. They focused big time on Vice President Harris at the convention. Heard from Congressman Ronnie Jackson, Congressman Brian Mast, the mayor of East Palestine, Ohio, who blamed Vice President Harris for not reaching out after a major derailment there. Congressman Matt Gaetz said Harris was the face of Biden's border policy. And finally, the big theme Tuesday night was the rule of, quote, law and order. And among those present were a whole bunch of criminals, because criminals and traitors stick together. But you had Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Rod Blagojevich, and Peter Navarro, who got out of prison that day, all of which got clemency by Trump, all of which were speaking at last night's RNC. Well, not Navarro, but he was on stage for a surprisingly long speech. And that is your recap from the RNC. I'm not going to say much more about it. I do have a clip of J.D. Vance, but let's get to some of the other headlines right now. More details coming out about the shooter or around the shooting. The FBI is saying that the young man appears to have acted alone, that the rifle used at the Trump rally shooter used was bought 11 years ago. The Secret Service was told police could not watch the building used by the rally shooter, meaning they didn't have enough resources, not that they weren't allowed. But the district attorney in Butler County, Pennsylvania, where the rally took place, said the Secret Service was informed that the local police department did not have enough manpower to assist with securing that building, apparently. Those are just a few of the new details I saw yesterday. What am I missing? Look forward to talking to you about all of this at tonight's Hangout. We haven't talked since the assassination attempt this past Saturday. I think it's fair to say that the head of the Secret Service has plenty of questions to answer, and I'm sure that she will soon. Although she was at the RNC last night for some reason, and she was accosted by Republican senators demanding answers and her resignation to her face. There's some video that you can't really hear exactly what's being said, but at least 3 senators haranguing Kimberly Cheadle at the RNC on Wednesday night. Of course, yesterday afternoon, news broke that President Biden had COVID, and what that means specifically right away is that he can't be out on the campaign trail for 5 days. He had to cancel some really high-profile, important events, including an event for Latino Americans in Las Vegas yesterday, and so that's terrible. Hoping he's going to be okay, but the pressure for him to resign is increasing. Apparently, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi all privately warned Biden he could imperil Democrats and saying some version of that he could not win. Apparently, he is considering dropping out now, is some reporting, and that he's asked whether or not Kamala Harris can win. according to other reporting. But White House spokesman Andrew Bates said that Biden told Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries in their private meetings that he would remain at the top of the ticket. This is, of course, another issue we'll talk about at tonight's Hangout. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. The Washington Post writes, the private warnings from Jeffries and Schumer are a striking message from the party's leaders and reflect the dire outlook among many Democrats after Biden's debate performance. Nearly 24 members of Congress have publicly called on Biden to exit the race, and many more elected officials apparently privately share that sentiment. Nancy Pelosi and former President Barack Obama have spoken about the state of the race in recent days, have both expressed concern privately about the president's path forward, according to more people familiar with their conversations. President Biden, for his part, has launched an energetic, sometimes combative effort to hear out the concerns of fellow Democrats, meeting virtually with 5 groups of House lawmakers. He's also spoken privately with party leaders, including James Clyburn. He had a phone conversation with Congresswoman Susan DelBene, chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which coordinates party's House races. Just some reporting from the Washington Post, the latest on the status of the president. Democrats, we're in purgatory over here, not knowing what's going to happen. That uncertainty, of course, creates tremendous anxiety and concern amongst all of us. And hopefully we will have a way forward soon. I'm being very positive, and I've decided today that we're going to have maybe some different ticket. It's going to be super exciting. It's going to energize everybody. We're going to win, and we're all going to look back at this time and be like, oh, man, I wish I wasn't so worried. How do you like that for an outlook? Uh-oh, people are grumbling at me. We'll talk about it tonight. All right, in other news, it continues to be hot. Breaking records all over the country, including places it's not normally as hot, like New England. The U.S. Navy exonerated 256 black sailors who were unjustly punished over a 1944 World War II port explosion, which was an interesting story to read yesterday. The blast happened at the Port Chicago Naval Magazine in California, killed 320 people, injured 400 more in 1944, and the military exonerated these sailors, these black sailors yesterday who refused to go back to work after the explosion and killed them. Really fascinating story that I read yesterday. Well, it was all over the news yesterday. The Supreme Court granted a rare last-minute stay in a Texas execution of a man requesting DNA evidence. A UK-based organization supporting parents who are not giving their children smartphones, founded in February and now has expanded internationally, U.S., Canada, and more, called Smartphone Free Childhood, is saying that a growing number of parents are refusing to give their children smartphones. The movement is going global. Like to see it. Wish it was there when my kids got them. Wish we had that discipline then. It looks like Senator Menendez, who was just found guilty of corruption charges, is actually going to resign from the Senate. What else do I have here for you? The Dow and S&P 500 closed at record highs as investors signal optimism that sky-high borrowing rates could come down in the fall. Special counsel Jack Smith is appealing Judge Aileen Cannon's decision to throw out classified documents indictment against Donald Trump. Talk about that with Rothkopf during today's conversation. And finally, yesterday, NASA said it would cancel its water-seeking moon rover, citing cost overruns and launch delays. The Viper rover was supposed to launch in late 2023 aboard a lander provided by a private company, but extra testing and increased costs kept delaying the mission and threatening other projects, according to NASA. Those are your headlines for yesterday, and that was the 17th of July. But today is Thursday, the 18th. I'm glad to have you here. Here's some of the sound bites I gathered for you from yesterday as well. Let's start with J.D. Vance. This is not from the RNC. This was at an appearance earlier, and this is him talking about and being the sycophant and suck up that he is to Donald Trump, talking about the assassination, referring to they shot him. And I think it's very important to call out this talking point because it's a super dangerous thing for J.D. Vance or others, who I'm seeing lots of Republicans and MAGA idiots using the word they. Who is they? Is that us? Is that anybody who hates Donald Trump? Super dangerous. Here it is.
I was so terrified that we had just lost a great president, but it would have been an unbelievably terrible thing for our country in that moment in time. I was just so afraid for him and so afraid for our country. And then, of course, he stands up a minute later after they shot him. They literally shot him. And he raises his fist in the air and he says, fight, fight, fight. He fires up the crowd.
All right. Well, that's all I've got for you on that. I just think that it's terrible. I think that every single person who says that should be asked immediately by journalists who they are and make sure they're very, very specific. All right, well, let's move on to, speaking of journalism, it's Daniel Dale at CNN, who a lot of people respect for his fact checks. And I've got another one for you, or from him and CNN. This runs about 3 minutes. I think it's important whether you fast forward or not, whether it's annoying or not. You got to go through these just to see how terrible it is, because we can't get numb to all of the lies. That's why I play it.
Anderson, there was a lot of stuff you can't really try to fact check. There were personal stories, general praise of Trump, broad denunciations of Biden, subjective accusations that Biden was personally responsible for drug overdose deaths, which I think we should note rose under President Trump as well. But there was also some significant inaccuracy we can check. Arizona U.S. Senate candidate Kari Lake made a wildly false claim that her Democratic opponent, Ruben Gallego, voted to allow illegal immigrants to vote in this election. That's a brazen distortion of a recent House vote on voter registration requirements. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas claimed with no evidence at all that Democrats deliberately let in illegal immigrants to somehow get their votes. Non-citizens cannot legally vote, and the data shows almost never do. And I thought it was notable that some of the most significant false or misleading claims tonight came from members of the House Republican leadership. Listen to what GOP Conference Chair Elise Stefanik and House Speaker Mike Johnson said about violent crime.
Biden's violent crime crisis, fueled by Democrats' pro-criminal sanctuary cities and defund the police policies like we have seen in my home state of New York.
We can't survive the dramatic increases in violence, crime, and drugs that the Democrats' policies have brought upon our communities.
Well, I'll do it again. This claim that there have been dramatic increases in violence and crime under Biden is false. In fact, both violent crime and property crime have fallen under President Biden, and there have been big declines over the last year and a half. Preliminary figures from the FBI show that violent crime is down roughly 6% in 2023, and then it dropped by a staggering 15% in the first quarter of 2024. The declines in murder in particular were even bigger. And so now, key fact here, murder in particular and violent crime in general are both below where they were in 2020, Trump's last year in office. Now, Congresswoman Stefanik's claim of a Biden violent crime crisis is subjective, I guess, but she certainly did not note that Trump had a violent crime crisis when he had worse numbers. I'm going to cough. Now, I'll caution again, this is preliminary data. A big chunk of local communities haven't submitted their numbers yet, so the precise extent of the decline in violent crime is to be determined, but it's clearly falling and not rising. And I also want to address, Anderson, a claim from House Majority Leader Steve Scalise on the Biden administration's record on U.S. energy production. Take a listen.
Let's talk energy. They've eroded the American energy dominance that President Trump delivered. We will end the Democrats' assault on American energy once and for all.
This claim about a Biden-era Democratic assault on American energy is misleading at very best. While it's true that Biden is pushing for a transition to renewables, the U.S. under Biden is producing more crude oil than any country ever has. It is a fact. The U.S. is setting fossil fuel world records under this administration. The U.S. produced a global record 12.9 million barrels of crude oil per day in 2023, easily beating the Trump-era high of about 12.3 million barrels. And Scalise also spoke of U.S. energy exports under Biden. Well, U.S. crude exports in 2023 were also the highest on record for anybody. Now, we should be clear here not to suggest these records are being set because of President Biden, who certainly has taken a bunch of steps the fossil fuel industry, oil companies don't like. These are market-driven increases, a lot of them caused by improvements in fracking, horizontal drilling technology. But nonetheless, Republicans, including former President Trump, keep pushing this notion that Biden has crushed U.S. oil and gas production. Trump sometimes says Biden has ended it entirely, and all this stuff is not close to true. Anderson?
All right, there he goes, Daniel Day, Anderson Cooper, CNN last night, the fact check. And now that was from day 2, rather. We don't have a fact check yet from day 3, but I will probably tomorrow. Now let's get to the vice president. Kamala Harris was in Michigan yesterday. She was sitting for a conversation, a panel conversation, and then she gave a speech, and I'm sure did a lot more. But here is a little bit first from the panel conversation.
And then recently the former president selected his running mate, the Senator Vance, J.D. Vance. Understand, this is a fellow who in the United States Senate participated in blocking protections for IVF. This is an individual who has said he is for a national and has made every indication that he is for a national abortion ban. And so, again, this is where the power is with the people. We have an election coming up.
There you go. And more from Kamala Harris.
On Sunday evening, our President Joe Biden issued a call for unity. And there must be unity around the idea that while our nation's history has been scarred by political violence, violence is never acceptable. There can be no equivocation about that. At the same time, the hallmark of American democracy, the hallmark of any democracy, is a strong competition of ideas, policies, and a vision for the future. And just as we must reject political violence, we must also embrace a robust discussion about what is at stake in this election. The surest way to reaffirm the strength of our democracy is by engaging in a vigorous and civil exchange of ideas. And one of the ideas and one of the principles that is at stake in this election is the issue of reproductive freedom. And that is why I am here today to discuss that topic, and I look forward to our conversation. Thank you all very much.
All right, I probably should have played that one first. That's from the speech, and then they went into the conversation yesterday. In Kalamazoo, Michigan, that is our Vice President Kamala Harris. And the late night talk shows were back this week for a week. I'm not sure if they're going to be off again. We are taping an episode of Last Week tonight, so you can expect that Sunday night. I'll be warming up the audience for that this Saturday afternoon in New York City, as I do at all of the Last Week Tonight tapings pretty much. But here is Colbert last night. He was live after the second night of the RNC, and here's a little bit of it.
Okay, I've delayed this about as long as I can. It's time to talk about the convention. Last night's theme was Make America Wealthy Once Again, MWOA. And tonight's was Make America Safe Once Again, MSOA. Which is fitting because this election year, MSOA worried. The evening kicked off with a speaker a lot of people did not see coming, Anne Hathaway. Wow! They got the star of The Devil Wears Prada, Ella Enchanted, and The Princess Diaries? No, they did not. They got Indiana GOP chair Anne Hathaway. I'm still a fan. Then we heard from West Virginia Governor Jim Justice, who brought a surprise guest with him.
I know that a lot of you want to meet my little buddy. So if Baby Doll could come on out here.
You fools! You can't have a dog at the same convention as Kristi Noem! Run, girl! Run! Fly, be free! Stay away from the gravel pit! This isn't Baby Dogg's first brush with politics, because during the pandemic, she was the face of the vaccination initiative championed by the governor. Really says something about this election when a dog believes in science more than the candidates. Is there anything in the rule book that says Baby Dog can't run for president? She's better than RFK Jr. She takes her worm medication. Florida Senator, worm medication. First of the month. Florida Senator Rick Scott spoke using the most exciting words you can ever hear at the start of a story.
Let me tell you about a dream I had recently.
Really? Let me tell you about a dream I had. It was a nightmare that Donald Trump was being endorsed by a half-man, half-serpent with dead eyes. And I can't seem to wake up.
All right, Colbert at The Late Show. That was day 2 he was recapping, so looking forward to see the recap of last night. And that's all I've got for you here in Headlines and Sound Bites. Doing it pretty much Monday through Thursday, often on Fridays, but I've always got the Hangout to do. There's only just so many hours in a day, folks. I've got to exercise and eat right as well. Thank you so much for your support. I cannot do it without you. I hope you tell your friends about this daily news analysis and public interest podcast and the way that we do it and the community that we have built here. Tell them to come on over. Stand Up with Pete Dominic daily, Monday through Friday, sometimes even Saturday. The best guests, all from our reality, which I like to call Earth One. And one of our fearless leaders is David Rothkopf. I love this guy, obviously. He's become a good friend of mine and the show. He's a columnist at The Daily Beast, host of Deep State Radio, which has a whole fleet of amazing podcasts. And you've got to subscribe to his new Substack, which is so good. I love reading it at Need to Know. It's called davidrothkopf.substack.com. All of that is linked, and everything else about David Rothkopf in today's show notes. We had a great conversation yesterday afternoon. I think you're going to like it and learn a lot from it. I look forward to talking to you about this and everybody else I've talked to at our Hangout. Looks like I'll be talking to Eric Siegel and the great Sam Cedar tomorrow and Saturday, or just tomorrow. I'm not sure when I'll post them, but really looking forward to both those conversations. But let's do it right now with the great David Rothkopf.
How are you, Pete? What's going on?
Well, I'm feeling, I think because everything got so crazy, I'm somehow have gone through in the looking glass and I'm feeling positive.
Wow, that's crazy. Why are you feeling positive?
I just feel like it's the only way to be. I cannot live in this world gone awry, in this storyline that we're in. How did you react to, on Saturday night, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump? What did you think that night? And furthermore, obviously, what do you think now?
Obviously, violence is abhorrent. It's a terrible tragedy that a spectator lost their lives and two others were severely injured. Obviously, I feel for President Trump and his family for having to go through such a trauma. And, we need to wait and see and determine what was really the motive behind this whole thing. And, right now it looks like this was just another one of these poor, lonely, bullied kids in a house full of guns who decided to act out in a way that put them on the public stage. Clearly, the Secret Service dropped the ball, did something, seriously wrong in not having this angle covered, if in fact that's how this study of what happened turns out. But, it was the beginning of a chain of a series of events. And, within moments of it, Trump, stands up and says, fight, 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 and tries to turn it into a rallying cry for his movement. And the people in the crowd start going, USA, USA. And you could just see how this could metastasize into further divisiveness in America. And, a lot of people were, painting Trump as a victim. Trump was painting himself as somebody who found God. But it's really important that we're honest with ourselves and we acknowledge that the foremost champion of political violence in America for the past decade is Donald Trump. That the person who led the single biggest act of political violence in America in this century was Donald Trump. That Donald Trump urged the police to use violence against people. That Donald Trump said, I'm going to have my military chief of staff assassinated. That Donald Trump wanted to use live ammunition against demonstrators and immigrants, and it was a little hard to watch people going, oh, this is a new Trump, and oh, this is a new Christ-like Trump, and he's bled for all of our sins. When he's just as bad as he's always been, and he has demonstrated it multiple times since then on social media, picking one of the worst VP candidates you could possibly imagine, in the actions of the whole crowd that's gathered in Milwaukee for this kind of, Leni Riefenstahl moment of, Nuremberg rally for Trump. And so, there was a tragedy that began this chain of things. But a bigger tragedy may be the result of this chain of events. Do
you have any questions remaining about what happened that day?
Sure. Well, nobody knows exactly what happened. Where did the Secret Service go wrong? I don't want to get into, conspiracy theories. I'm pretty skeptical of those. I don't think, there's some vast right or left wing conspiracy that got this poor loser guy caught up in it and so forth. that won't stop people from talking. I don't believe it. There's something a little fishy with Donald Trump's wound. I got to admit, even though I'm skeptical, something happened to his ear. I don't know what it was. I've read a lot of credible people who say that if high velocity round clips you in the ear, the vortex behind the high velocity round will do more damage than the round itself and could rip off the ear.
Really?
Yeah, I've read that. And I've also, I also find it, quite apart from whatever it was that actually happened, absolutely ridiculous that, on Monday afternoon, Donald Trump is hanging out with J.D. Vance with no bandage on his ear and no apparent damage to his ear. And then on Monday night, and since then, he's wearing this little square gauze pad on his ear as though that were required when it obviously wasn't required on Monday. And by the way, it was also not required on Sunday when he was golfing, and obviously he was deeply traumatized by the event and the loss of life involved because he waited, 12 hours before he hit the golf course.
Right. I haven't read if he called.
We haven't heard anything about that. We also haven't seen a doctor's report. Usually a president gets hurt. The first thing you do is get some spokesman from the hospital and they say X, Y, and Z happened.
Right.
And the only doctor who's reported on Trump's health has been that pinnacle of truth, Dr. Ronnie Jackson.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he's made a statement saying,
I didn't see that he had spoken out. What did he say?
Oh, he said it was definitely shot, but the bullet passed through his ear. And so, let's be honest. Just go look at a video of what happens when an AR-15 round goes through anything. Just go look at a video. I'm not saying it didn't happen. Maybe it happened, or maybe it passed 3 feet from his head, and that's what, I don't know what happened. But it's a little weird. And
apparently it's been debunked that it was a shard of glass from the teleprompter. I didn't know.
Well, they showed pictures of the teleprompters and they looked like they were intact.
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know why the real tragedy would be no democracy, 20 million people deported, authoritarianism in the United States, Ukraine handed over to the Russians, Taiwan, apparently, he said yesterday, handed over to the Chinese, the end of the justice system in the U.S., rounding up of his political opponent. That's the tragedy we ought to be focused on here.
I feel you trying to steer the conversation to more important issues, and that's fine with me. But I think that you were tweeting questions about there not being a medical report, and that was the water I was leading to when I said, "Do you have any questions about it?" And
well, you could just ask me the question. Why are you setting a trap for me here?
Well, because I thought there might be other questions that you might have, and I'm glad I asked it that way because you mentioned how bullets work. I didn't know about that. Thing.
Well, look, this is what I've read. I'm like a Jewish guy from New Jersey. I do have a marksman first class badge from Camp Skoglund in Maine when I was a kid.
That's one thing better than the shooter had. He didn't even make his high school shooting team.
Yeah, he was kicked off. Apparently, he couldn't hit anything.
Seems to me that the kid was probably, well, it doesn't matter. I've already shared my opinions in previous episodes, and I've only got just so much time with you, and I do want to get to more important things. So let's talk a little bit more about J.D. Vance. You've written about him. You think he's pretty much the worst of the worst, and also it doesn't seem to really help Donald Trump with any voting constituency other than his already born supporters. What do you think?
Look, he's a terrible guy. He doesn't believe in anything. He thought Trump was Hitler. He used the term Hitler. I wouldn't put the word Hitler in somebody's mouth, but he called him America's Hitler. That's bad.
Have you ever walked back calling someone Hitler? Have you ever been like, you know what? I was wrong about that guy called Hitler.
Yeah. Oh, honey, that's fine. You called me Hitler. Let's have a date. Come on. That's crazy. He's got no beliefs. He's got no values that he holds to. He's talked about the Democratic Party being run by childless women with cat women. He's talked about what he wants to see in America's ruling class. He says he wrote a famous book about his upbringing in Appalachia, but, he's obviously a complete traitor to all of that and has been renounced by all his friends from there. But, I can set all that aside. I'm a foreign policy guy. He goes to the Munich Security Conference and he says, I'm not interested in Ukraine. I don't see any reason to help Ukraine. Right. Ukraine's a corrupt country. I'm interested in other parts of the world. He meets with Viktor Orban and then he goes on US TV and he goes, that guy's smart. He could teach us a lot. And, embraces ideas like, the federal government should control what people teach at universities. He is more pro-Putin than Trump. I mean, the person who must have been happiest with the nod given to J.D. Vance is Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
It could mean 20 years because he's 39 years old. He could be around a long time. He's clearly the heir apparent to the MAGA movement right now. It could be 20 years of a U.S. party that is actively pro-Russian. And by pro-Russian, I don't just mean pick a random country. I mean one of our worst enemies. They're siding with our enemies. What do I mean by enemy? I mean countries that want to destroy us, kill Americans, destroy our economy, destroy our allies, kill people in the countries of our allies, impose their views on us, undermine us. They want to see us fail. And that's what he supports?
So you don't think you don't like him?
Well, you could put it that way. I think he's just a menace. I think he's very dangerous. His domestic policy views, his attitudes towards women, his attitudes towards abortion, they're from The Handmaid's Tale. He is, some people have described him as a more articulate version of Trump, which is scary. Somebody who could package Trump's message with a nice bow around it. He's gone on, the air on a variety of these programs and said, well, Marjorie Taylor Greene says a lot of strange stuff, but she also agrees with some stuff with us. And we just need to have as many people on our team as possible. So let's overlook the fact that she's a complete nut job. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but, he was essentially saying, let's have an open tent for lunatics.
He's a blank canvas. He'll say whatever it takes to maintain power and be corrupted.
Or to get power. Right. I mean, he's just ambitious.
I can only imagine what he told his wife. I mean, I didn't have any idea about his wife, but they're both Ivy League and they seem pretty smart and they must have had some talk about.
Well, don't you love this? I mean, we've never talked about your college experience, Pete. I'm happy to talk about it. But, here, everybody's like, well, the Republican Party is standing up against the elites. Because they have a billionaire who went to Penn and a running mate who's a millionaire venture capitalist who went to Yale. That's the anti-elite ticket? Come on.
One thing I'm finding kind of interesting is this thread about some of the tax policies and trade policies that Trump has submitted and obviously that Vance would support is scaring capitalists, free market capitalists, traditional conservatives that want to be able to make as much money as they can. Not to mention, I think, a lot of real smart.
Well, but here's the thing. All those people. And by the way, Vance comes in. What does Trump get? $45 million a month from Elon Musk.
Yeah. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's all quid pro quo because Vance is the protege of Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel and Elon Musk are in it together. Trump said, if I pick this guy, I'm going to get a lot more money into my campaign. And these guys all think, well, Trump and Vance don't believe in anything, so they'll buy our message. The Republican Party, by the way, now is against regulating TikTok, possibly the only thing I agree with them on. But they've sort of switched sides on this entirely. The Republican Party, because of these guys, they're kind of against regulating AI.
Right.
Leave it to the tech bros to handle this thing. But I think all these people, including the Jamie Dimons of this world, are kind of like, well, Trump won't be so bad as they know that nothing he says to get elected, he believes. And that he can say, I'm for China, I'm against China. Right. It can change on a dime. And his idiotic trade policy, which is, I'm going to eliminate taxes by creating a tariff on every item that comes into this country, which would cost the average American, I've seen different estimates, between $1,500 and $2,000 a year. It's a tax on consumers, folks. Tariffs are not paid by foreign countries, despite what Donald Trump says. Tariffs are paid by consumers. They're a cost that is passed along to you by the manufacturer. They don't actually affect those companies. They affect you. And, many economists have called it the single most inflationary idea that any presidential candidate has ever proposed.
Not to mention this other policy I saw, tax policy proposal that was part of Project 2025 that would raise average Americans' taxes a lot and lower super wealthy people's taxes a lot, which has always been a conservative tax policy idea, trickle down. But when put that way, it's just another point to where the Trump supporter, the average Trump supporter, is taking money out of his own pocket with that vote. The trade policy, the tax policy.
The Project 2025, which everybody needs to understand, the document is 900 pages long. Now, most people don't read 900 pages in a year. They just don't read. So that's what the Heritage Foundation is thinking when they write something this long. But we don't have to wait for the tax policy in Project 2025. In the 4 years of Donald Trump's administration, the only major piece of legislation he got through was a tax law that reduced the taxes on the top 1% of Americans and increased the taxes on most everybody else. It benefited the few and not the many. It's not hypothetical. It happened.
Right.
Look it up. Google it. Who benefited? Who paid the price? And so you don't have to look into the future. You could look in the rearview mirror and you'll see what you're going to get.
Got to ask you two more big questions. One, of course, is about the development with the classified documents case, as it's commonly referred to. Jack Smith, special prosecutor, going after Trump for taking boxes and boxes of documents and leaving them in unlocked rooms, all kinds of secrets he wants to sell, like every other part of America. You have a really important point about that, and you say that it's obviously the illegal news with political consequences, but that's hardly the whole picture. You point to, as you know, the national security issues. What are you worried about?
But look,
what are you so worked up about?
Yeah, it's a good point. I just take a deep breath. What's the big deal? Hundreds of documents, military plans, top secret documents where by releasing them, you could put our members of our intelligence community and assets around the world at risk. Nuclear secrets. Okay. He stole these. When he was asked to give them back, he said no. He was told by his own staff, you can't have these. And he kept them. And where did he keep them? Well, he kept them in the bathroom at Mar-a-Lago, and he waved them around in meetings. Now, you know, and I know, because it doesn't take a whole lot to figure this out, that Mar-a-Lago was teeming with spies. Because, of course, if Trump's the president or may be the president again, and there is this place he hangs out where he can just sort of walk in and out, you're going there, right? So here are these documents, and they're there. We also know that Trump passed along confidential, classified information to Sergei Lavrov and the Russian ambassador in his first quarter is in office, in the Oval Office. He just sort of passed it on. This was Israeli stuff, and the Israelis were pissed off.
Yeah.
Well, all of our allies are going to go, I'm not giving this guy information.
Right.
You know, right. We can't, you know, this puts people at risk. We're not going to do this. So we're going to be flying blind. That's dangerous. Our assets are going to be at risk. That's dangerous. And we also know that thanks to the verkakte immunity decision of the Supreme Court, that Donald Trump is going to be able to sit there and go, well, you know, as president of the United States, I think I'd like to give this big box of documents to Vladimir Putin. And nobody can stop him. He'll do it with impunity. It's treason, but president acting officially is immune.
Right.
So it is a national security crisis. And if you were in the U.S. government and you took one of these documents home, you would immediately be arrested, immediately be put in jail, and spend years in jail. How do I know? Watch the Reality Winner story.
Yeah.
Just Google Reality Winner.
Yeah.
See what she did. One document. She was kind of well-intentioned in what she wanted to do with it. She was arrested at her home before the trial, sat in jail in the run-up to the trial, got a heavy sentence, sat in jail. And what she did was a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what Trump did.
She doesn't have the protections of the executive office.
Well, I mean, look, we can talk about this in any way you want, but if you're talking about it from the point of view of national security risk, Donald Trump is a profound national security risk. He's a felon. He's a multiply convicted felon. He would not get a clearance as a felon. He has known ties to foreign enemies and has said that he trusts them more than he trusts our own intelligence community. He would not get a clearance. He has mishandled this information. He would not get a clearance.
Now I feel bad about downplaying it earlier when I said, what are you worked up about? Because when you make the case, it really scares the shit out of me.
Well, it should scare the shit out of you. But now I'll tell you something else that bothers me.
Oh.
That the Biden administration, and we love them, our dear grandfather, who we love, and who must defeat Trump under any circumstance. But the Biden administration has decided they're going to give classified briefings to Trump as the candidate.
It's the right thing to do.
It is fucked in the head.
Well,
it is so not the right thing to do.
Why are they doing it then? Why would they possibly do it?
Because we always do it. Okay, but we don't always have a candidate who led a coup against the U.S. We don't always have a candidate who is a criminal, who is convicted of 34 felony counts. We don't always have a candidate who has mishandled classified documents before. This guy is a security threat. And if he gets elected by the American people, the American people say, okay, buddy, you're in charge. Well, at that point, we have to give him the keys to the kingdom. But for the next 3 months, do we have to say, well, just because we did it in the past, we're going to do it again? What if he does not become the candidate or the president? What's he going to do?
They're not going to let him see anything important, I'm sure.
No, of course not. And what's he going to do with it? He goes out, he goes into the thing, he writes a little thing on the back of his red tie, because that's long, there's room.
Yeah.
He writes like some notes.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't get the job, and he goes in and he says, hey, Vlad, I bet you didn't know what the new propulsion system is on our latest boomer submarine.
Or we've got a guy that serves you dinner every night feeding us information or anything else.
Yeah, right. Well, right. But I mean, he actually said at one point as president, oh, yeah, here's where our submarines are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's said, who knows what he said, because he sat with Vladimir Putin without anybody in Helsinki, didn't they?
No, that's true. But these are things we know he did.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like he sat in the middle of the dining room at Mar-a-Lago in the middle of a crisis with North Korea, having a public discussion. Everybody around him heard what the fuck was going on.
Yeah, but you're also smart to mention that story from when he was president and he gave the Lavrov information and the Israelis were pissed. It's like, why would you do that? What's the advantage? And he just does it because he's a insecure guy and he was trying to impress the Russians in that case, just for him. But look what I found out. So finally, you mentioned Grandpa. The attention was taken away from President Biden's tough decision because of the attempted assassination. But apparently there was a call that took place about an hour before the shooter fired that rifle with a whole bunch of Democrats that like 50 Democrats are ready to call for him to resign because apparently he was so bad on the call. They said it was worse than debate. Now, I don't know anything about that, but there's a lot of sourcing on that. Where are we today on that? You've still been talking and tweeting about that. You're unafraid. What are your final thoughts as of Wednesday, the 17th?
Look, my final thoughts are this. Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy. He must be defeated at all costs. If he must be defeated at all costs, then it behooves the Democratic Party, which is the only party that has a chance to defeat him, to do everything in their power to make sure that they do. That means look at the numbers, look at the feedback you're getting from the field, and make your decisions in a cold, calculating way about how do you beat him. Okay? And frankly, it behooves Joe Biden to do that and to set egos aside and to set the false issue of personal loyalties aside and just do the thing that's in the best interest of the party and to do it in a way that maximizes the chance of the party to win. Now, I'll tell you this. If Joe Biden ends up being the candidate, I will work night and day to ensure, to do whatever I can to help him get elected round the clock. It is that important. I won't do anything else between now and then except focus on that. And he's been a good president. He's a good man. There's nothing I'm saying that's against Donald Trump. But I would implore people who don't agree with the people who say that Donald Trump, that Joe Biden should pass the baton, to at least listen to the other side, because the debate is illuminating.
Right.
And you can come out of the debate and say, well, we need to change candidate. Or you could come out of the debate saying, oh, well, Biden has these weaknesses. How do we fix them? And that increases our chance of being successful. Instead, we have a food fight going on and people going, oh, these are the elites. Well, it's not the elites. A poll came out today that shows the vast majority of Americans think Biden should not be the candidate. Okay. Or, oh, these are, Washington insiders. Well, I'll tell you something. I live in Washington. I know a lot of these people. I'm a schlemiel, but I hang out with people who are not schlemiels. These people are hanging around in the White House. These are the people who've seen Biden day in and day out. If Nancy Pelosi is not sure it should be Joe Biden, last year you thought Nancy Pelosi was a genius. Give her some credit. Today, Adam Schiff. It's just, if you're a Democrat, well-intentioned, and you want Joe Biden to be the candidate no matter what, remember, be honest. 2 years ago, you thought the sun shined out of Adam Schiff's ass. You thought that this guy could do no wrong. So today, when he, after much internal struggle, says, I think Joe Biden shouldn't run, then what you got to do is you got to say, well, let me listen. I wonder why this guy Schiff, who I respect, has asked this question. And I'll tell you something. And again, personally, I've written it multiple times and I've taken endless shit. Joe Biden should hand the baton to Kamala Harris. She should run. She's the vice president. She can take the money. It could be clean and easy. She can pick, I don't know, Josh Shapiro, Andy Bashir, Mark Kelly, Gretchen Whitmer, Wes Moore, whomever. As a running mate, it'll be vital, wonderful, off to the races. I think that's a better choice personally. As I said, I will support Joe Biden if that's the final decision that is reached. But the party can't blow itself up the way it's blowing itself up.
Right.
And Biden's team is being defensive, according to reports. They're not looking at the data, according to reports. And I think they need to do that and just take the best interest of the country at heart. And if we end up then with Biden, great. So long as we feel we're now got the best shot we've got to win. And if we end up with Kamala Harris, great. But I'll tell you something. And this is my last point. I was at a lunch with a bunch of people just now, and I went around to every single one of them is a dyed-in-the-wool Biden supporter. And I asked them, do you think Joe Biden will serve out his full second term? Every single one of them said no. Every single one will vote for him, work for him, support him. But you got to ask yourself, what? Where are we? Where are we if that's the prevailing belief?
I bet you do that a lot at lunch. You just take over and ask a question, do a polling thing, a focus group at your lunch parties.
It's why nobody invites me to lunch anymore.
Wait, I just got to ask you, why was RFK talking to Trump? Why are they talking? Do you know anything?
Because I think Trump's people want RFK. They thought of RFK because his name is RFK. Those are his initials, but you got my point.
Yeah.
They thought that he would take votes away from Biden.
Right.
So as it turns out, he's going to take votes away from Trump. So all of a sudden, Trump's people are like, well, hey, maybe you should endorse us and I'll make you Secretary of Anti-Vaccinations and this will be great.
Right.
And so, I think that's the thing. But RFK, who nobody has ever paid any attention to in his life because he's a schlemiel, RFK, is saying, no, I like it out here, getting all this attention. Yeah. So anyway, but I mean, I was talking, if you listen to our podcast, the Deep State Radio podcast that we just did today, I had Tom Nichols and Rosa Brooks and Ed Luce. And Ed Luce is at this convention. And just listen to his description. It is the fucking end of the world. It's just horrible. And it just should motivate people that whatever your differences with fellow Democrats, respect each other and then set them aside and put your shoulder to the wheel for the next 4 months. Because the alternative to Democratic victory is disaster.
Well said, sir. And thank you. As always, I'm going to go listen to that. I love me some Ed Luce.
Ed is good. Tom Nichols is great on this episode. Rose is great. So.
Always great. You're always great. Thank you very much for joining me today, as always.
Thank you, Pete.
All right, there he goes, David Rothkopf. We'll talk about him and all of my other guests and conversations tonight at our Hangout if you want or not. We talk about whatever you want to talk about at the Hangout. I'm always there to bring up different subjects and ideas and hopefully some candidates this evening I've invited to join us to stop by. We'll see who makes it and who doesn't, but reaching out to Harry Dunn and Ryan Bussey and governor as running for Montana governor, and John Avalon running for Congress in Long Island, and maybe more. Who should I reach out to join us at our Hangout? You always let me know. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Can't do it without your subscriptions. Welcome to all the new subscribers, bumblebees listening all the way to the end. You guys are my favorites. John Carroll taking us out. See you tonight.
Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right. We got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand up.